hang tight.
It's the MissKnockout show.
All right.
On the airwaves. So like, if I share, if I bless, if I the flow. It's the MissKnockout show. Now you already know. Hot topics, music, info, and more. If you ain't tapped in, what you came here for? MKO got the vibe, that's a full takeover. From beats to biz talk, yeah, the queen stay in clover. Trending every lane, I'm the glow you can't block. When I drop gems, whole chat goes shock. We don't do brokeify, now we amplify. Stay blessed if I let the energy fly. Hit that tap if I keep it all in the flow. Cause it's the MissKnockout show. MissKnockout show. Hot topics, beats and the glow. You rockin' with MissKnockout. Let's go. Let's fuck.
Everybody doing on this beautiful day? What's up with everybody? All right, welcome to MissKnockout. We want to continue to share because I had a few take care of these last couple of days. Some really good stuff, I must say. Really good stuff. Really good stuff. But now I'm back. All right. I am back. I'll be back early tomorrow morning at our regular schedule time. But I want to come on here today. All right. I want to come on here today. And we want to get it popping. You know, crackling for a Friday. You know, I couldn't stay away from you too long. How's everybody doing? Okay, who did I miss in the comments? Bevy's over here. Let's see who we got over here in the Y. Teresa's over here on the Y. What's up now? Y'all can hear me good? Can you hear me good, Teresa? Yes. So everybody come on in. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about P. Diddy. We are going to talk about Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane. Because Gucci Mane just released a record, you know, spilling his heart out about the situation. He didn't name no names. Now, the thing is, we can't play it on the Y, but we're going to play it on the tick to the Clizot. All right? So after we end the Y, scoot your behind back over to TikTok because we're going to play Gucci Mane where he just lays it all out on the line. And I'm like, wow, Gucci Mane took it. He took it to the booth, yo. Gucci Mane know how to take it to the booth, don't he? Who heard Gucci Mane's record? I have my tapper going so I can't. Okay, that's good, Bevy. That's good. It's all good in the hood. Yes, thank you so much for the tapation. Teresa, Team Knockout. You can hear me good, Teresa? Has every guy mic check 1 2 on over here on the Y to the Tubesy? Make sure you give me a thumbs up because that helps the video to go out. So help me get a thumbs up. We'll be back at our regular time tomorrow. I just had some things I need to do and some good things, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, let's get right into it. All right, let's share. Let's put hashtags on the clock. Kalila J is in the building. What's up, Kalila? Let's put hashtags in the tick to the Clizot. All right, so let's get it out. What's up? Our French ladies in the building. What's up now? Where you at, girl? You still traveling? Y'all be traveling, boy. I wish I could travel a little bit. But yeah, everybody come on in. So we're going to talk about P. Diddy first. So P. Diddy had this appeal. And everybody's like, wow, appeal? Like, what is he appealing? Well, we're going to go over that. Why is he appealing? What's going on with it? What are they arguing? What are they saying? They're trying to get Diddy out of there. That's the bottom line. From my perspective, they are trying to get Diddy out. Diddy is in there, and Diddy wants out of there. Real bad. Like Young Miami said, real bad. He wants out of there real bad. And his lawyers is going for this appeal, and they have a reason, and they presented that reason on the 9th. I didn't go to the courtroom, you know. I just didn't go. I might go to the next one, y'all. All right? What's up, Olivia? What's up? A couple of y'all was hitting me up on the inbox saying, Knockout, you ain't going out there. And, I didn't go out there, but I got all the information. As a matter of fact, I got the whole stream from the courtroom. We got everything that happened in the courtroom. What's up, DJ Jones? What's up with you? All right, so y'all sit tight, and we're going to play it. All right, we're going to play everything that happened in the courtroom, start to front to back. But what I want you to do right now is I want you to sharify the room. Let's get the word out there so that when we start. I don't have to repeat myself and people creeping in. I want everybody to get their booties in here at one time. All right, because we got a lot to talk about. That man that starts with a T is still going down the road, messing with those people and just messing with them. What do you think is going to be the end result of this? It can't be good. It cannot be good. I will tell you that. And we're going to go over that. All right. Gucci did a answer record, or whatever you want to call it. He ain't named no names, but it was very clear what and who and everything he was talking about. Now we're going to play the record on the Tick to the Clizzock, but on Y to the Tuesday we can't play it. What's up, Jassy? It's my cousin's birthday. Well, happy birthday to your cousin. So glad you can make it over here. Who farted? What? You coming in here trolling Tyler? Tyler, stop coming on in here trolling and stuff. Stop it. You don't got nothing else better to do. Maybe you did it, Tyler. Maybe you did it. You ever heard the saying, whoever smelt it, dealt it? Thank you, always. Thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody, but continue to tapify, continue to sharify, and everybody join the super fans for the month. Make sure you join the super fans because we're gonna have super fan lives very soon. They trying to troll me on YouTube, but they can't get started. All right. Thank you, always first class media's in the building. Thank you so much for the hand hearts. So we're gonna talk about Diddy first. We're gonna listen to the whole case of them presented their appeal. All right, of what happened in the courtroom. I want everybody to break out your earbuds, your popcorn, put me on the Bluetooth. If you're cooking dinner, go cook dinner, put me on the speakerphone because we getting ready to get busy now, as we always do when MissKnockout's on the check-in. Boo, right? Who's up in here? Who's up in here? Drop me a comment. Who I got to say hi to? Let me see who I missed. Let's see what we got. We got always first class. We got Ambi. We got Lizzie. We got DJ Jones. We got Vodka Ice. We got MissKnockout Clips. We got E Money Games Play 95. We got Damali Society. We got Capricorn. We got Shauna. We got Ashley Bailey. We got Special 723 is in the building. We got Jamal Music. We got Terrence. We got Nicole. We got Liz is in the building. Let's go, y'all. Let's go. Thank you for chilling. And then two of them left. Yeah. I gave y'all that whole shout out only for two people to leave. I tell you, you just can't win. You just can't win. All right, everybody. So first off, we're going to listen to the court happenings of what happened in the Diddy trial. So everybody get your popcorn. I'm telling you, slave race. Oh, nice shout out. Two people said I'm leaving. I don't like the way she said my name. I don't like the way she said my name. I don't know, y'all. I don't know what else to do. Do I gotta start? I'm gonna start power begging. Do you want me to start power begging? Because we can start. We can start. I heard it's a good little gig now. Hey, Betty. Shauna, Slay, you know what I'm saying? So everybody come on in. So first off, we're gonna talk about Diddy. Okay, yes, Diddy is popping up all over the place, like Orville Redenbacher. And why is he popping up? Because Diddy put in for appeal. Now, why did Diddy put in for appeal? Because he wants to get the F out of there. Jail is no place for a millionaire and a person of his caliber to be. Let's just face it. It is what it is. Right? What's up, Cha-Cha? So he wants to get out of there. So how is he going to get out of there? By bombarding them with appeals. So now here they are in appeal court. Trying to get an appeal, trying to get out of there. Diddy's like, what? I got to get out of here. I got stuff to do. I ain't got time to be sitting around here sleeping and eating Caracas and Ramen Moody, whatever they eating there. Because I don't know. Where's all my peoples and them that been on the inside? You know what they eat. Okay, put it in the chat. What do they eat? What do they eat? What do they eat? So, Jack Mac. Okay, Shana said Jack Mac. Ooh, I hate to ask what that even is, Shana. The Jack part got me like, ooh. What's up, Hancock? What's up? Slop. Well, sometimes it's slop. Don't want to know. Slay said, I don't want to know. So listen. So Diddy wants out. He put in for appeal. All right. So right now, okay, we're going to listen to it over here. And I'm probably going to put up a picture. And we're just going to listen. Right. But over on the Clizzock, we're going to watch. Right. And we are going to listen to see what happened in the courtroom. We're going to go over it. Probably going to talk about, I have to stop it every once in a while, y'all, because I am on the live and TikTok has to register me as being on the live. So I can't just let the thing play and I don't say anything. You know, they got to hear you interacting. You know how the clock is. They're just nosy as. All right. It's a smelly fish in a can. I don't want to know. Y'all are something else. So we are going to go over. Okay. We're going to play it on this side. I think I got it up. Yeah, I think I got it up. So we are going to go over what happened in court with this appeal and why are they appealing. Okay. So we're going to go over why they're appealing afterwards, but we want to run through this while we have this recording up. So everybody tapify, everybody get your popcorn. If you're at work, put me on the Bluetooth, put me on your speaker, put me on your TV, and let's get it crackling. All right? Let's get it crackling. All right? So let's listen to what happened in court. Hold on, let me share. Oh, yeah, share this screen. Okay, hold on. Okay, hold on, y'all. Let me see which one. Oh. All right, y'all. So now look. Everybody come on in. Everybody keep tapping. All right, so let's listen to this court happenings. All right, everybody come on in.
Battery 70%.
Okay, hold on. You know that.
300 Pro. And MICHELLEVRACY.
It's made cool.
Well, actually,
No, I can't.
I'm going to jump in right there, and I appreciate that you're leading with all that. If you were going to the question of the Sixth Amendment, is where you were going?
Not quite.
Okay, I will. Why don't we lead? One of your arguments is that it would violate the Sixth Amendment to consider acquitted conduct. Let's put it that way. And I guess I would ask you, is that not a question that is foreclosed, putting aside whether, in your view, Watts does foreclose this on a part of the Supreme Court? It has certainly been a holding of this court. Sentencing courts may consider acquitted conduct at sentencing. Isn't that right? Panels of this court have held that.
Yes, Your Honor.
So then my question is, other than preserving your argument for consideration by this court en banc, or by the Supreme Court, how is it that this panel could, in your view, overrule precedents of other panels of this court?
So let me say first, and I'll get this where I was going
First.
before necessarily need to resolve.
No, I understand. Assume though, because you did brief the Sixth Amendment issue, what it is that you would expect this panel could do in light of prior precedents of this court saying that it is constitutional for a sentencing judge to consider acquitted conduct.
Two things, Your Honor. First, as
Thank you so much.
argued in the
Get your
brief, we
heart.
believe the Apprendi line of cases, including the more recent ones, and I would highlight in particular, this wasn't discussed expressly in our briefs, but was alluded to in the amicus briefs, the Erlinger case from 2024.
You're saying that those cases implicitly have overruled our circuit's precedents?
That be unconstitutional.
And I guess I understand that, but we typically cannot rule a prior precedent of stop unless there has been an intervening decision of the Supreme Court or of this en banc court categorically doing so. We can't find that our precedents have been undermined by subsequent developments and abandon them. That's why we have the en banc process.
What about
I understand, Your Honor, and if this court is not inclined to take up that issue for those reasons.
Well, it's not a question of inclination. I'm asking you why we would not be bound by prior precedent, regardless of the validity of your arguments, which maybe are good ones, to take to an en banc court or to the Supreme Court. I'm just talking about stare decisis here.
Well, I don't think the court has expressly addressed this issue since the guideline amendment. I understand that the guideline amendment is a separate issue, but the reason the commission amended the guideline was in light of these constitutional concerns expressed by, among others, Supreme Court justices. But I also think there's another.
I guess I'm lost there. You're saying that there have been, I mean, if we have a binding decision of the Supreme Court in Watts, we have binding decisions of panels of this court. You're saying that we can look at dissent of the Supreme Court, which are not binding, or we can look at.
everybody come on in? We're listening to Diddy's appeal case. Come on in, Tapify, Shareify, put hashtags in the comments if you can. Okay, Tapify, Shareify, get your orange heart and blessify MissKnockout so she won't be brokeifying, because I'm bringing you the whole audio of in the courtroom. Okay, that way we ain't got to search for nothing. We can hear it with our what? Own ears. Pull up a chair.
Statements concurring or dissenting in the denial of cert as overruling binding precedent? You're not suggesting that, right?
Again, I don't.
No, I just want. Are you suggesting that?
We're preserving the argument.
That I get.
Okay. I really don't want to spend a lot of time on that. If I may.
Well, we're going to be here for a while, so don't worry about time.
Okay, good. Thank you. There is a second piece of it, though, that is relevant to that question, which is that I believe that precedents of this court in the 3553 analysis, including Vaughn and Johnson, have held that, notwithstanding the rule that Your Honor referred to, that district courts must specifically explain in their arriving at their sentence. They must specifically consider the acquitted conduct and, the jury's acquittal when assessing the weight and quality of the evidence that the district court is relying on. And that did not happen here. So I think that's important too. Now, if I may, I'd like to
that line of argument I'm familiar with. And I'm going to apologize. I'm not familiar. Where did you raise that issue with the district court below, that even if it is constitutional?
Everybody that's coming in, we're listening to Diddy's appeal case. We are listening to Diddy's appeal case. So pull up a chair and a snack and get into it, because it's some tea.
To consider acquitted conduct, he should consider the weight and quality of the evidence below?
Well, first of all,
That's the quota by Gigante line of cases.
we cited the Vaughn case in our papers. And
Before the district court.
For the district court, and I believe it was in our reply brief. But I would also just point out that throughout our papers below, we made abundantly clear in over 100 pages of briefing that for multiple reasons, the district court shouldn't consider acquitted conduct. But
no, that's a distinct. There are various arguments one can make against acquitted conduct. One could make a Sixth Amendment argument. One could make a guidelines argument. One could also make the Gigante line of argument saying it is permissible, and yet you are not, as a district judge, compelled to take into account acquitted conduct because you must also consider the nature and quality. And arguably, I suppose, under some lines of cases, one would ask the district court to adopt a higher standard of proof when doing so.
That's not what I'm really saying. When I'm talking about what Vaughn says about what Vaughn says specifically. I'm not suggesting that.
If Vaughn, come on in, we're listening to Diddy's appeal case.
It says that the court should consider the acquittal when assessing the weight and quality of the evidence.
Correct.
That's it. It's one sentence in Vaughn. And then it goes, as Judge Nardini referred to, into citing Cordoba and Gigante. But how did Judge Supermania not do that here?
He didn't do it at all. If you read his statement of reasons, he simply says, I'm only sentencing you for the conduct you were convicted of. And then he goes on to discuss all of the acquitted conduct.
But at the sentencing hearing, he acknowledges that of the acquittals. And he says, he acknowledges you were acquitted of these charges. Are you arguing that under Vaughn, there needs to be a detailed explication as to each fact, how the acquittal on the other charges goes to the quote weight and quality of that evidence as to each piece of conduct considered? Or is it enough for the district judge to acknowledge, I get it, you were acquitted on these charges?
No, it's not enough. Obviously the judge acknowledged that he had been acquitted, but that's not enough. That's just make weight. And I think in both Vaughn and in Johnson.
Make weight?
In other words, he said, yeah, there was an acquittal, but he didn't explain.
Make sure you give a thumbs up on the You to the Tubesy side. Everybody on the Tick to the Clizock side. Share, put hashtags in the comments. We're listening to Diddy's appeal trial, okay? Everybody come on in.
Didn't mean it, or he wasn't thinking it? What does make weight mean? It's a rather disparaging characterization. And I want to understand what you mean by it.
Well, what I mean, that's not what I mean, just to be clear. My point is simply that what Vaughn requires and Johnson requires is not just an acknowledgement that there has been acquittal, but some sort of discussion of why the judge, notwithstanding the acquittal, finds that the weight and quality of the evidence supports enhancing the sentence. If I may, I'd like to go on. McClinton made clear the Supreme Court would take up the issue of the constitutionality of acquitted conduct sentencing if the commission didn't act, and the commission did act and amended the guideline to ensure that not guilty really means not guilty. And this case is exactly what the guideline was written to address. Mr. Combs was acquitted on sex trafficking and conspiracy, but convicted on prostitution charges that didn't require proof of coercion or conspiracy.
Well, we're going to get to coercion and all that. But let me pause on a couple of these guideline questions and ask you why we would even need at least some of them to get into this debate about the scope of acquitted conduct. Let's start with the leadership enhancement.
Hey, Teresa.
My understanding is that under the leadership enhancement, as the guidelines provide, it can be imposed if there are at least 5 criminally responsible participants. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you have Mr. Combs, who was convicted, correct?
Correct.
So he's one. You have the 2 escorts who traveled across state lines. I understand that you are trying to challenge the convictions on the theory that they were not actually planning to engage in this specified forbidden activity, but assume that they were, and that we would have upheld those convictions. Those 2 would be criminally responsible participants, correct?
Well, the district judge relied on Christina Coram and Mr. Combs's employees and certain employees.
Yeah, but if there were 5, we have enough. Didn't he also rely on the 2 escorts?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, let me ask. Here's my question. Would the 2 escorts be criminally responsible participants?
Hold
if
on, y'all.
They traveled across state lines with intention to engage in the forbidden activity?
Well,
So-
this court has to review the findings.
That's the
below.
Right, just let's stick with my question. You can go back to it. Would the 2 escorts be criminally responsible participants under the guidelines if they cross interstate lines with intent to commit activity?
I
Let's
actually-
give them a minute.
Exactly.
Don't think that's clear at all under the Supreme Court precedents about the Mann Act. The people transported are often not viewed as co-conspirators. There's an old case, I'm forgetting the name.
No,
of
the
it.
question isn't co-conspirators, whether they're criminally responsible.
Well, it's this, I mean,
Not the same.
the Supreme Court cases, and I apologize that I can't remember the name of it, would only consider someone to be criminally responsible if they were involved in arranging the transport or something like that, but not necessarily the person.
Right,
who
I recall
traveled.
those cases.
So
Okay, so that would be your argument as to why the 2 escorts are out, or an argument why the 2 escorts are out. And what about the 2 named victims in this case who pretty sure the district court cited evidence that they had participated in the arrangement of
Well, the
transportation.
government never took the position that they were co-conspirators. The
I'm not
government,
talking about co-conspirators. I'm talking about whether they're criminally responsible under the guidelines.
well, it's the same, for all practical purposes, the same thing.
Really?
Yes,
Is that
yes, I think
really?
it is, clearly.
If I cause someone to commit a crime, the person who commits the crime is guilty as a principal, and the person who caused the person to commit the crime is guilty as a principal. But that is a conceptually different concept from
See,
conspiracy,
now-
right?
Yes,
Section 2 conspiracy,
It's all
Section
about
2,
the-
18
that's what
U.S.C.
it's
Section
about.
2 is not the same as,
This is what the whole thing is over. The Mann Act. The Mann Act is an old law that hasn't been devised and revised in hundreds of years. And they use that to get them. So they're arguing this. It's part of their argument. The Mann Act. Let's listen.
Section 371.
Thank you, Andrea.
right.
Thank you for the present. Thank you.
If I may, Your Honor, the district court didn't rely on those others. This court has to review the district court's specific findings. The conspiracy that Mr. Combs was acquitted of clearly required the jury to find it that he acted with other people. The government argued that he led the conspiracy to the jury, and the jury was also told that if they found any 2 racketeering acts, even of the same type, and that he participated with someone else, that was sufficient, and yet the jury acquitted. So
but that would be sufficient to find RICO? If you find that 2
it
people
wasn't a
agree, hang
RICO
on.
charge, it was a RICO conspiracy charge.
But it's not, you're not guilty of RICO conspiracy if 2 people agree to commit a predicate.
That's
right?
not what I said.
Right. And that's not what the district court instructed the jury,
No,
right?
the instructions, the only disputed elements were whether there was an agreement with at least one other co-conspirator, whether Mr. Combs knowingly joined the
Agreement to blank. Agreement to what?
agreement to participate in the
Thanks,
in the
Mama
conduct of a racketeering enterprise.
Right. So one could agree to participate in a predicate act without agreeing to participate in the affairs of a racketeering enterprise, right?
The jury also necessarily, on the facts of this case and the way it was argued to the jury,
You laughing? Thank you for the orange
there's
eye.
no way
How you
that
doing,
the jury
Alexis?
wouldn't have concluded that there was a racketeering enterprise if they concluded that Mr. Combs committed these
Now you
crimes
seem to be
with
going
others.
into Sixth Amendment collateral estoppel areas though, right?
No, I think what the court has to
Cole.
look at is what the jury necessarily determined to
Thank you so
determine
much,
what the.
Lily.
That's a collateral estoppel argument under Cole. I mean, there is this thing that we say acquittals don't constitute factual findings of anything, right? They are determinations that somewhere within the elements of an offense, the jury found
Listen to the Diddy
something not
appeal.
proven beyond a reasonable doubt, but they didn't make an affirmative finding that anything else.
No.
Now, we do find sometimes in Cole, for example, that for collateral estoppel purposes under double jeopardy, the jury must have concluded something or another. And that seems like where you're going here.
Well, Your Honor, the commission wrote this guideline for a reason, right? And it requires courts
She's
to
talking
figure
to the
out
judge.
what the acquitted conduct is. And the simplest and clearest way to do that is to look at what elements the government is required to prove for the counts of acquittal and the counts of conviction. And so if the jury, in this case, what we have, let's take the sex trafficking counts. The only disputed issue was whether there was coercion or threats or fraud. And that was one element. The government's case focused on that issue. Its arguments focused on that issue. Its evidence focused on that issue. And the jury clearly rejected that argument. So we know.
So doesn't the coercion as to the two pieces of evidence that the government relied upon at sentencing, right, which is the threat to one threat to Ventura, one threat to Jane. I think one was to release the tape. The other was we're going to I'm not going to pay your rent. Doesn't that establish the intent of the Mann Act? That is the intent to violate the Mann Act. That's what the district judge used this evidence for. He says that it overlaps to this extent. That is the RICO.
So I'm not going to pay your rent is the Mann Act? Like, we confused now.
Conspiracy overlaps with the Mann Act. And insofar as we're talking about intent here, and why don't those two pieces of evidence support his factual finding and that there's intent for purposes of the Mann Act?
No, Your Honor, for two reasons. First of all, the intent element and the coercion elements are, as the government said, totally separate. And under our view of the acquitted conduct guideline,
come on
we have to look at it by element. And this type of analysis it shows why the relevance test is problematic. But I understand your point about the relevancy test, but isn't that just nomenclature? We look at substance, not at labels. I don't think it's nomenclature because this is a relevant conduct guideline. The whole point of the guideline is to take acquitted conduct out of relevant conduct, and a relevance test really is another way of saying, well, acquitted conduct is not relevant unless it's relevant, which makes no sense.
They wanted acquitted.
I do want to talk about the specific incidents and why that's not correct. So first of all, with respect to the Cannes incident, there's actually no evidence that there even was a Mann Act offense in connection with the Cannes trip. So the government's argument is that threats were supposedly made on an airplane flight returning from Cannes to New York. Under Broxmeyer, United States against Broxmeyer, 616 F3rd 120 at 127, a 2010 case from this court. The court held that for purposes of the Mann Act, the intent to engage in prostitution, which has to be a dominant purpose of the travel, has to coincide in time. And there's no evidence that even on the airplane, they were planning a so-called freak-off. And moreover, there was no evidence in the record that there was a freak-off other than Ms. Ventura's testimony.
Pause.
So she's saying that there is no other evidence that there was a freak-off other than them saying that it was a freak-off. Now, we weren't there. The only people that was there was them. But look, everybody describing the same thing for me. Thank you, Flower Power. Well, more than a couple of people describe the same thing. I don't know, right? Let's listen.
You just said there was no evidence other than a witness's testimony, which is another way of saying there was trial evidence.
Right.
The jury is the finder of fact. So this, not only was this argued to the jury in the summation, but the jury sent back a note asking for, quote, Cassandra Ventura testimony regarding Ken and the events immediately following the trial,
so she won't be brokified. We're listening to the Diddy appeal
in the district court. And we know that the jury rejected the notion that that there was coercion in connection with that incident. With respect to the
You're mixing two things. Let's grant you the notion that they decided coercion had not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Put the tag sign in front of them. Okay? See what you're doing, flower power? Yeah, that's right, flower power. That's what I'm talking about.
But you were just arguing a different thing.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, y'all.
The defendant did not have an intent for purposes of the Mann Act transportation. What, during the conflict?
It's all
Because
good.
then we were saying there was no evidence that a freak off even happened. Now, we're sort of venturing down beyond whether the jury found coercion to now say, yes, because you could say the jury found, yes, these events happened, but they weren't coerced. That's fine. But now you're saying they also found that none of this even happened. And I don't see how that follows.
That's not.
Who said none of it happened?
That's not what I said.
She said that's not what I said.
Well, you said there was no evidence that the freak off happened except for Ventura's testimony. And then you were trying to argue the jury necessarily rejected Ventura's testimony. And I guess you're saying because they rejected the argument of the government that it was her testimony showed there was coercion, they must have rejected every single thing that Ventura said.
That's not what I said.
Well, that was the implication. So let's back up.
I meant to imply. The point is that the government relied for its the Mann Act, the whole Mann Act charges were basically an afterthought of his trial. They took up almost no time. The government relied principally on these two charts. And if you look at Government Exhibit 1402.
I understand that, and you made that point very well in your brief. So isn't your argument really that what the government is doing here is mixing and matching? They're taking evidence from the claims that were acquitted to try to support the Mann Act sentencing for purposes of the Mann Act, but none of that jury was presented to the jury for purposes of the Mann Act.
Yes,
is that a summation of what you were?
That's fair. And I think our view of the sentencing guideline as we briefed is that the way it should be interpreted, and I think this is very simple and straightforward, is that acquitted conduct can only be used when it is also convicted conduct. And if I may, I can point to some hypothetical examples.
Before we do that, let me just focus on the Mann Act for 1 second, and I hope it will inform this discussion. So the Mann Act is indicted to say that the transport was of either, as to count 3, Ventura or the escorts, and as to count 5, Jane Doe or the escorts. But at trial, the government theory was that count 3 is violated and count 5 is violated by transportation of escorts to engage with Ventura and Doe, right? So it's not Ventura and Doe that are transported for those convictions, isn't that right? Or because that's what the government's closing argument is talking about, transporting the escorts.
Yes.
Well, mostly so. Is it do you believe that either the transportation of Ventura or Doe or the transport of the escorts could be the basis of the jury's conviction on 3 and 5?
I think it was that if you look at the charts, the focus is on the escorts for sure.
Well, I was looking at the closing arguments.
Yeah,
the government's closing argument.
That's right.
So if the theory advanced at trial is that the escorts are the ones being transported, but we're referring to count 3 as the Ventura count and count 5 as the Jane Doe count because that's the person who was involved when the escort arrived.
Thank you, Flower Power.
Then how do we now, in light of that, how would we consider things like the con trip?
Well, then I would say then it doesn't count. But I think what I was getting at, and I don't think I was very clear, so if I may, I'd like to explain it a little better. The con trip, they were in con and then they flew back to the United States. They were flying home. So the purpose of the trip, even if a freak off did happen, wasn't to engage in prostitution. It was to come home. And under Miller and Broxmeyer and the jury instructions in this case, the dominant purpose of the trip has to be to engage in prostitution.
So can I ask you though, I hadn't understood the government's argument to be that the purpose of flying home from con was to engage in the activity. I thought it was the fact that he went, according to the witness, on the plane, sat next to her, showed her the video, and then immediately turned around and arranged for the escort to travel to the hotel where then the activity happened, was evidence that this is what, that the thing that happened at the hotel is in fact what he intended to happen, as opposed to his argument that no, I wanted people to travel so that I could have a, an attractive scene, but if there was actual, sexual activity that followed, that was just something that happened. But by showing a video of people engaged in such activities in close proximity to the event that actually transpired with the activity, it showed that his purpose in making this whole arrangement was to have the activity occur, and that manifested his intent.
But that's not sufficient to establish a Mann Act violation. The purpose of the travel has...
Everybody come on in. We are listening to the audio from the appeal trial for Diddy. All right, so come on in and get your popcornification, pull your chair up, get your earbuds, cook your dinner, whatever. I gotta go in here and turn my chicken over, okay? But we are listening to this right now, and it's tea. So pull your chair up and listen. Continue to share the room out. Continue to tapify and continue to blessify MissKnockout, so she won't be brokified, just like you bless those power beggars. You know, the ones that be in there, give me a uni, those ones. Bless me like you bless them, because give me a glove. Who got a glove? Because they be just going off, and you'll just be like doing it to them. Do it to me like that. All right? Because we actually getting something in here. Now, if you're just coming in, we're listening to the appeal of Diddy. All right? If I disappear for a second, that means I'm going in there and flipping my chicken over. And yes, I'm bringing in my chicken, and I'm going to eat it in front of you, because we all in this together. All right? Now, let's listen. And if you don't follow me.
But it certainly contributes to it, because you have to have intent, right? So I could arrange for the intent of anyone to cross state lines. Then various activities could happen. But it's not a Mann Act violation unless I transport them with the intent that those events transpire, right?
That's my point.
So that's what I'm saying is, why does this not go to prove his intent, which is an element of a Mann Act violation, that the reason he had the people, the escorts, travel across state lines was so the activity would happen?
I think that gets back to the point I was making earlier, that under our view of the acquitted conduct guideline, that is just too far afield, and it's basically like a relevance test. You're saying
he proved his intent.
Prove that.
So what evidence are you saying that some evidence of his intent does count as an offense conduct and some does not?
Well, first of all, if you actually look at her testimony, I don't think she testifies to what Your Honor just articulated. And in fact, the testimony establishes that they got to New York and then they had dinner, and then he suggested a freak off after that.
Well, right. This is a question for the jury to infer about whether the temporal proximity between him showing a video to her on the plane and then immediately getting back to New York and suggesting it and having it play out is why he wanted the escort to be traveling.
But there's no basis from which to conclude that the jury even found that this.
I feel like this whole case is about how Diddy is effing people and his sex life, right? Don't you feel like the whole case is about who Diddy is effing? The whole case. Well, he brought him back from here and he had him there. And it's like, if we put people on trial in the U.S. about their sex life, they got people out there that make Diddy look like the Pope from the East, okay? Now, everybody come on in. Let's listen to this. Let's listen.
Particular incident.
They're giving Diddy a hard time.
Was this incident cited in connection with the Mann Act charge?
They giving him a run for his money.
This is a Mann Act violation?
No. The Mann Act, the government's discussion of the Mann Act,
right?
Closing argument.
That's right. He freaky dicky.
We have to write an opinion here, and let's just step out of the weeds. And we have to.
We got some freaks in here right now. If you a freak, put a Y in the list. They be like, shoot, I don't care, knockout. Yep. Can we imagine if we put everybody's bedroom on trial? Because that's what I feel like. I'm embarrassed to be in Diddy's bedroom. I'm like, why are we in Diddy's bedroom? Like, we don't want to be in Diddy's bedroom. We want to be out here and we want to be in our bedroom. You know, they all up in white, like who Diddy is giving the beefcake to. LOL, that's why you call. What's up, K-Mac? What's up? To all respect, they had it. He's powerful. That's right. That's right. You right about that, Flower Power. Yeah, mine will be boring. Yeah. So everybody come on in. Let's continue to listen to this appeal. We have the audio. All right, let's listen.
Enunciate a principle, right? And the guidelines, the discussion of the guidelines talks about line drawing exercises that courts have to engage in to determine where there's overlap, where acquitted and convicted conduct overlap. Can you articulate a principle that
this is a judge and a lawyer's talk.
If you were writing the opinion, what principle would you enunciate that is, readily administrable by courts to engage in this line drawing exercise? Can you give me a bright line test of some sort?
Yeah, let me try. If I may, I'll try to illustrate it with some hypotheticals. So I think the test should be, and what the commission intended the test to be, that courts cannot use acquitted conduct for guidelines purposes unless the defendant was also convicted of that conduct. And in order to determine what that means, you would look at whether the same element that has to be proven in connection with acquitted conduct has to be proven in connection with element or elements convicted conduct. So, for example, let's suppose you have a case in which a defendant is charged with drug conspiracy to distribute narcotics, as well as several substantive counts of distribution. And the defendant is convicted of the conspiracy and with respect to the substantive counts is acquitted of some and convicted on others. When determining the drug amount, the court could not count the ones the defendant was, the weight from the ones the defendant was acquitted of for the substantive counts, but could count the ones the defendant was convicted of, as well as any other drug deals that were either proven at trial or are proven at sentencing if they're not charged in separate substantive counts. That's one example. Another one would be you could have a fraud case in which the defendant is charged in securities fraud as well as wire fraud. And it's the same exact scheme to defraud, the same false representations in both counts, but the defendant is acquitted of one and convicted on the other. The way to make sense of that is to say it's clear the defendant has been convicted of the scheme to defraud, and so you could count the entire loss amount, even though he was, let's say, acquitted of wire fraud. Either because maybe the jury didn't find the wire in furtherance or something like that. But,
well, I had to run around a couple of days. I had a couple of things to do. I got on here late today. We'll be back at our regular scheduled time soon. But, I had to run around and take care of a couple of things. But I'm back now, Caroline. All right? And we here. We rocking. We rocking. Hey, Dion.
It's clear that they did find the scheme to defraud proven because the same conduct underlies the element in both charges.
To what extent does your theory rely upon the what the government argues in terms of the evidence? In other words, the case that's presented to the jury in terms of the elements. Is that dependent upon that, or does that matter? Is that irrelevant?
I think it depends on the case. I think you have to look at the indictment and what's the charge and what's the government theory of the case. So
the theory of the case as presented to the jury, right? It's not their theory of the case in the abstract, what may be in the indictment, but it's what is actually, they have a case to prove, right? So wouldn't it be the evidence and the arguments that the government makes to the jury?
It's definitely very important. And I think that's why, that's why we think that the the test that's used for collateral estoppel is.
And so was any of the evidence and the arguments the government made here in connection with the RICO and sex trafficking offenses, was any of that evidence presented to the jury for purposes of persuading them to convict on the Mann Act?
Yes. I'm sorry. Were you asking just about the RICO or the?
No, both. So to what extent did the government's case at trial on RICO and sex trafficking overlap with the government's evidence and arguments on the Mann
Hey,
Act?
Lila, thank you, Lila, for the orange heart.
So, as the government said, itself said it was totally separate, but with from the sex trafficking counts, the overlap. Well, let me just
should the judge hold the government to that for sentencing purposes? And should the district court say, well, you put on all this evidence that the jury rejected, right? And now you want me to look at this evidence to support a conviction under this other, to support a penalty under this other offense that you were convicted on. But you didn't present that evidence to the jury.
I think
so. This judge is a little spicy. You know what I'm saying? He's coming back at her like hard and furious. It's almost given like he's already biased, but they kind of got a good argument because she keeps coming back at him, right? But he's a little spicy, right? Yes, he is, right, Dion? Let's listen. Everybody, we're listening to Diddy's appeal case. Let's
just start with what are the elements that the government had to prove.
Yes.
And so prostitution. If they didn't have to prove for the Mann Act, if they didn't have to prove coercion, they didn't have to prove a co-conspirator, then we know that there is no convicted conduct that includes coercion or co-conspirators. And that's really the starting point. And I think the evidence and the arguments just reaffirms in this case that that the evidence that the judge was relying on is totally separate and in fact was acquitted conduct because
that word again, acquitted conduct.
Matching is what he's doing, right? I mean, the district.
Okay, but when she keeps bringing up that word, acquitted conduct, okay, they're trying to get this acquitted, right? Because they're saying that the charges that Joe was convicted him of was dropped, and then he had a lesser charge, and then y'all overcharged him, and he did his time, so let him out, right? But the judge is coming at him hard. Thank you, Flower Power. Everybody that's coming in, everybody continue Tapify, continue to Shareify. We are on all platforms right now. You can watch this back on Y to the Tubesy. Just go in my link tree, and all my links are right there. My face to the Booksies, XE, all of that, okay? So you can watch it back. We are listening to the Diddy's appeal trial. So come on in, get your popcorn. It's Friday night. Let's loosen up, you know what I'm saying? And let's get into this tea.
Court here reached into the evidence that was used to support the government's RICO and sex trafficking case to for purposes of establishing the penalty under the Mann Act.
Correct, and he found coercion when the jury had not found coercion, including as to those two specific instances, because the government made those arguments and expressly told the jury correctly under the jury instructions that if they found coercion, each of those instances would have been sufficient to convict on the substantive sex trafficking.
Were there limiting instructions given or requested during trial that certain evidence would only be admissible with respect to certain of the charged offenses?
No, and that wouldn't really have worked here because there was a RICO charge, and as I'm sure Your Honor knows, under RICO, basically
everything would have come in as to RICO, but the idea that it's admissible as to RICO but not admissible, say, as to the Mann Act.
But
so I guess what I'm going to
that
is
would not have been legally permissible in this case because the Mann Act was also predicate acts to the RICO. I mean, that just wouldn't have been a valid instruction.
Well, I guess where I'm going with this is, does that mean that all the evidence that was admitted would have been legally admissible to prove any of the particular offenses? So going towards Judge Baker's
What's up,
hypothetical,
Rat
is there a scenario here where the
Thank you
judge
for the
was
rose
pulling
leaf,
evidence
bud.
that was not, I don't know what you would say, admitted for purposes of proving the Mann Act, and then it's impermissible, say, for the judge to look at
Thank
it
you for
with
the
respect to the Mann
34K,
Act when
y'all.
he's at the sentencing period. And I guess what I'm asking
What's up,
is that in
Rat
fact the case here, or was all of the evidence
What's up,
admitted
why
for
not you?
unlimited purposes such that there is no, as long as it would be relevant and probative to prove up another count, then it would have been permissible for the judge to consider it with respect to that count.
Well, I think the reason it's not permissible for him to consider it is because it's acquitted conduct. And the judge,
Well, let's give you that. Let's accept that. Let's accept that premise for the purposes of my question, that yes, it would underlie some of the acquitted counts. I think then the question becomes, is it overlapping, right? So would it be permissible nonetheless to consider it with respect to the convicted counts?
no,
And right, and I understand your answer is no, and I'm trying to get at why. So is it because it wouldn't have been admissible to prove the Mann Act count? In other words, does your argument depend on that at all? Or I think what I hear you arguing is if there is an element of the acquitted charges that does not match an element of the convicted charges, what is embodied in the element of the acquitted conduct, which is coercion, fraud, is now completely off the table for sentencing. Is that your argument?
so that is our principal argument.
Okay.
There's a secondary
That's the
argument,
principal
and I
argument.
hesitate to even raise it, but it's, we've made it that even if you actually adopt the relevance test that the
Jack?
district court
Jack
imposed,
12 Gordon.
that these things wouldn't have been
What's
relevant.
up, James?
But I don't think the
Well,
court should.
the relevancy
go
test,
there.
I find your argument confusing on that because I think
Well, it's
the
not a
district
real
court
argument.
made,
That's just
but frankly, I think
fallback.
your brief mischaracterizes or caricatures the district court's use of the word relevancy. I don't think he's saying relevant in the sense of relevant conduct under the guidelines. I think he's taking relate to in context of having probative value with respect to one of the elements of the convicted offense, which is another way of saying it would have been admissible evidence to prove an element of the charged offense.
I think that's right. And our point in
For a start,
the
he's
briefing
overtaking
below
her for a
on
start.
that,
What's up, C-Mac?
especially, and I think we make this point in the opening brief as well, is that test is far too broad. And
But it's not
basically
coextensive with
Rule
relevant
401.
conduct. Because I think in your brief, you say that blows up the acquitted guideline because it would basically, it's just a circular definition of relevant conduct. And I think that's not what the judge was saying. It would be a smaller subsection of things, much smaller subsection of things than anything involving relevant
I
conduct.
don't agree, Your Honor.
Thank you so much,
I think that
Mangione
it's a
Nation.
distinction without a difference because the concept of
I really appreciate that, Mangione Nation. Thank you, WW in the chat.
relevance, as
Thank
the
you so
district court is
much.
using it, as Your Honor seems to be using it, is the same as Rule 401, which is incredibly broad. And as this court has, repeatedly held, it's a very low bar.
Thank you,
And it basically
Mangione.
includes sweeps in, many things. And it's-
Well, no, take this. The defendant is convicted of one bank robbery. At sentencing, the judge considers 10 other bank robberies
Listen
that were
to the scenario.
committed on completely different days using, and let's posit, completely different modus operandi. But it's relevant conduct. And so the judge considers all 11 bank robberies when calculating the guidelines. I don't think that one would then say that had there been a trial on bank robbery 1, all of the other 10 bank robberies would have come in as relevant evidence because under my hypothetical, where there was no common MO, they would not be admissible under 404B. So I don't think if you draw a Venn diagram, you're going to find perfectly coinciding circles for relevant conduct under 1B1.3 and relevance under the rules of evidence to prove up an offense.
What's up,
But
C-Mac?
even if that's the case, on what we're dealing with
Thank you,
here,
Aileen, for the likes.
this evidence of coercion would not have come in to prove the Mann Act. It clearly would have violated 404, 403. There are numerous reasons that I think it's pretty indisputable that if all Mr. Combs had been charged on and all he'd been tried on was Mann Act, that we wouldn't have, you know.
But what about the idea that if we had, let's say he was only charged with the Mann Act and his defense was along the lines of one of the things the defense raised at trial, which is he never intended for the specified activity to happen after these folks crossed state lines, that it just, you know, it just kind of happened. And one of the ways the government tried to disprove that or tried to prove his intent was saying, no, he used to talk about this all the time, what he wanted to happen. In fact, there was one time on a plane that within 24 hours before the event happened, he actually showed a woman videos of prior episodes where the activity had happened. And sure enough, within 24 hours, that's what he arranges to happen. Again, that's proof that this is exactly what he intended to happen. It is not mere coincidence. Why would that not be admissible?
That's not what the defense to the Mann Act was. Most of the case was focused on the coercion and the RICO, and to the extent
I thought that was part of the defense. No,
it wasn't, Your Honor. The only
This is the judge going
arguments
back
that were
and
made
forth.
specifically about the
The
Mann Act
judges,
by the
He
defense
ain't having it.
was the argument that based on the testimony of the and the evidence in the case was that the escorts were paid for their time.
well, right. That's the same argument. They were paid for their time, and everything that happened afterwards was just not something that he was arranging. He was not transporting them for the purpose of what happened afterwards. It was just their time.
I guess I'm getting a little lost. I apologize. But I think the
Getting
point
a little
here
lost.
is that the principal point here is getting back to Your Honor's earlier questions and my dialogue with Judge Baker, is that you have to look at the elements. That's our position. You have to look at the elements. This idea that you have a relevance test is not consistent.
But your argument,
Charlie, you look at Charlie?
I just want to highlight, I'm sorry.
Well, no,
Go
there's
ahead.
a question.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Well, finish your point, then I have a question.
I just wanted to highlight, and we've mentioned this in the briefs, but if you look at the history of the guideline, the Department of Justice wanted the commission to use the phrase relates to in the guideline, and the commission rejected that because they thought that was far too broad, and they went instead with the language that's in the guidelines.
So the problem I have with your test of an elements test is that sometimes the problem is we have different elements, right, for the RICO, for the sex trafficking versus the Mann Act. But there's evidence, conduct that can underlie the government's case, right, in all these sets of charges. And
He
it's
came out the
mere
gate with
fact
Watts
that
and they
you're,
threw her whole game off.
acquitted
Right, Mrs.
doesn't,
Robinson?
by the the plain terms of the guidelines,
That's
right? It
kinda
doesn't
true.
take it off the table insofar as that conduct is also convicted conduct. And so what we're trying to discern here is where's the line, right, for purposes of sentencing. And so you just can't rely upon a test of the out, because it cannot be that just because in all conduct that is underlying the element of acquittal is then taken off the table, right? It can't be by itself.
Well, I don't agree with that because I think it's going to depend on the case, right? And there are going to be cases that are maybe
She keeping up with
closer
him.
than this one.
Right.
So you're going to have cases, for example, where there are maybe inconsistent verdicts, things like that. That's not the case here. This was very clear. You know, I sat through this trial for 8 weeks. The government's focus from beginning to end was on the sex trafficking and the RICO. The whole where the debate was there coercion or was this sex voluntary?
Right,
That was the gist
the
of
Mann
what
Act was an
being
afterthought.
disputed.
It was an afterthought. The Mann Act was just an afterthought, and the government's prosecution. I mean, it was there, but it was effectively a sideshow.
What's up, J.
But
Marks?
that's the question, right? Can the government then look to all this?
Listening to the Diddy appeal case, yo.
Look to evidence presumably rejected by the jury and acquitting on these other things for purposes of finding the penalty in the sideshow. And why not? Why shouldn't we just hold the government to what it argued?
We should, absolutely. And I think the whole point of this guideline was to deal with the fact that many people in America, not just Supreme Court justices, not just other judges, but, you know, I've really questioned whether it is both constitutional and right and consistent with respecting jury verdicts to allow acquitted conduct to be used to drive a sentence in this way. And I want to highlight that, and we mentioned this in our brief, but I'm not sure we gave it the prominence it should. This sentence was the highest sentence ever imposed for a Mann Act defendant sentenced under the same base offense level and criminal history category.
Well, let me ask you about that. So, would this offense be let's take the violence off the table, right? The allegations of violence that the jury rejected in the acquitted.
So then why you mention this?
What about would this verdict? Would this sentence be substantively reasonable in your view, given that we also have factual findings of psychological abuse, emotional abuse, and applying these two women with drugs? One of them became an opioid addict as a result of it. Would that, presumably that's still on the table if we take away the violence.
This is the judge talking.
I think that it would be substantively unreasonable under the correctly calculated guideline range, because it would be multiples. It would require a variance upward based on the acquitted conduct. And
that's not. But it's the guideline range is just. It's not a per se rule. It's a guideline, and it's a starting point. But then you look at the facts of the case, and we have two statutes that tell us you look at all these factors, and we have one statute that says there's no limitation. And am I correct in understanding that we have this factual finding that we have two women who were plied with drugs to participate in this, and one of them became an opioid addict. And so doesn't that support the reasonableness of this, putting aside the violence?
Well, a couple of points. First of all, you're correct that that's what the district court found. There's the evidence in the trial is much more complicated than that.
But you don't challenge and appeal those factual findings. You're not challenging that factual findings. You're making legal arguments.
But this court has to review the sentence based on the guidelines calculation taken as a starting point. And this is actually where I was going. I don't even think I got to this.
You did
it. The Supreme Court in Martinez-Molina and this court in Seabrook and many other cases have held that a guidelines miscalculation is a significant procedural error that requires a remand and resentencing in most cases, even under plain error review. And so, for instance, this court has held that if you accept the guidelines argument, even in part, a significant upward variance would have been required, and a remand is required because the judge would have had to explain that variance. And indeed, this court has held that even where the sentence is within the range of the correct guideline range, a remand is necessary.
But sometimes, go ahead.
Sorry, what do we do with the fact that the district judge here, after each guidelines finding, made the statement that he would have imposed the same sentence with or without this increase? It seems to me that if we accept the judge's representation that that guidelines decision, it was not what drove his ultimate sentence, that then moves us into the question of whether he could have used the acquitted conduct for the 3553A calculation. But how do we get over that sort of potential harmless error hump that he did make that statement after each increase was imposed?
So this court has repeatedly held that a major variant that the district court cannot insulate itself from appellate review by saying that he would give the same sentence. The Seabrook is one example. We've cited others in our brief, and the Supreme Court in the Molina Martinez case and this court and other cases have pointed out, for example, that this isn't like a new trial and a resentencing,
Yeah, but sometimes we have. I mean, I understand. You can point to some cases where we say, you know what, we're not sure the guideline error really was harmless. We don't know. The judge said it wasn't, but we don't have a high level of confidence. The judge was very emphatic here.
Well,
and careful. So It doesn't sound very boilerplate. It
But
doesn't
it's
sound like
also-
anything the district judge did here was
It's also clear
boilerplate.
that the acquitted conduct drove the sentencing.
And then we would get into the
and
Sixth Amendment
The
issue,
judge
right?
sounds like he's out to dinner.
I'm talking about the guidelines calculation as the starting point. And the other thing that is really important here is that the district court's guidelines calculation exactly mirrored the PSR, and it seemed clear that the district court was really planning to follow the PSR. And indeed, when he imposed the sentence, he initially said he was following the recommendation.
Wait. Are you implying that the district court wasn't thinking for himself and that he was?
No, not at all.
Then
My
what does
point-
this argument about tracking the PSR have to do with anything?
It has to do with the fact that the guidelines
crazy.
range was very important in the ultimate sentence.
And you're saying that the district court must have placed the same weight on the guidelines that the PSR did?
No, that's not.
Then what is the implication? I'm trying to understand what your implication is. It sounds like you're going to a place where the district court
Coco, he
was
giving them
not
a hard
thinking for
time.
itself or was somehow implicitly adopting parts of the PSR that it didn't or something.
No, Your Honor, that's not what I'm saying.
Then what are you saying?
My point is simply that
Then what are you
this court
saying?
has repeatedly held that significant procedural errors require remand. I mean, two of the cases,
That I
And-
understand, but
and-
now I want to go back. What were you talking about with the
Hey,
PSR?
Coco.
I don't understand that point.
okay, what I'm saying is that you don't know what the district judge would have
This
done if
judge
he had
is like-
understood the guideline
He's
range
a hard
to be
customer.
either 21 to 27, which it would be if you accept all of our guidelines argument,
It's
or 30
chicken
to
time,
37
Charlotte.
if you get rid of the grouping,
That
just for
judge is
example.
Even though he told us what he would do. I
Because-
understand the
Thank
argument.
you, Coco.
I would understand. I don't think you made it quite this way, but maybe this is what you meant to say, that if we
Listen to
agree
that
with
judge.
you that all of his guideline enhancements were wrong, he never said, and even if all of my guideline calculations are wrong, I would do the same thing, as opposed to any individual thing. So if we found one guideline error, though, he said to us he would have done the same thing. And you're saying that we don't take that at face value?
That's correct, Your Honor, under the precedents. And
Well, some of them we do. I mean, there are some cases where we have reversed and remanded, and there are others where we
This
said, well, the
judge is
judge
not
told
on
us he
their
would do the
side.
same.
But
So it's
we don't
harmless.
have a case where there would be a significant upward variance like this. We don't have another
What's up,
case the
Harlem?
government could possibly cite where the sentence was the highest sentence for any person in this criminal history category and base offense level, even including others who had a coercion enhancement. There's no case remotely like that that the government could point to.
No,
And
dear.
indeed, some of these cases involve things like in the Bennett case, and I forget the name of the other one. In a couple of the cases,
So Diddy's lawyer is saying that Diddy got the highest sentence that anybody has ever got in the man out. And the judge seemed like he ain't trying to hear none of that. Right? This judge seemed like he's a hard customer,
the
Diddy.
judge thinks the guideline range
Diddy, you might
is
need a new
X, which is a
judge.
little bit above the statutory maximum, and then sentences well below the statutory maximum. And this court says it has to go back because the judge thought the guideline range was higher than the maximum. So,
Thank
you know,
you
in
for
that
the
case,
52K.
clearly there's been a significant
Which
departure
country are you from?
from
I'm from the
what it could have
USA.
been, and the judge gives reasons, but the court sends it
USA.
back. And that's what the court should do here. That's what's required by those cases.
Okay.
I understand your argument. I mean, I fully understand
I
your
don't know.
arguments
This is
about
another
the
judge,
acquitted
Bevy.
conduct for purposes
I
of
don't think this is the
coercion
same
and leadership
judge.
enhancements, right? Those were four points apiece. But when it comes to the victim, the characterization
This is an
by the
appeal
district
court.
court of Inshura and Jane and the escorts
This is
as
a whole other
victims,
court.
that's not really, as you framed it, it's not really an acquitted conduct argument.
This
You're
judge ain't
just
having it.
arguing with
Whoever this
disputing
judge
the
is, he's
district
not
court
having
characterization of these people as victims. So that doesn't really fall into the acquitted conduct bucket for purposes of deciding this case.
I mean, I think there's two issues that we're raising there.
I know the law professors agree with us on that because they don't join you on that. The law professors who filed your, by the way, a very helpful brief. I thank them for that.
What's up, Tom?
Very helpful brief. Did pointedly did not, they stopped when they got past coercion and leadership.
That's fair, Your Honor. I think our principal argument on
said
that,
that's
we
fair.
are arguing that the acquittals show that the jury didn't believe the two women were victims, but our principal argument
See,
there
she keeps
is
bringing
that
that up.
the term victim should
She
be
keeps bringing that
interpreted
up.
according to its plain meaning, which is someone harmed or injured by the offense, and that the application note is inconsistent with that plain meaning. So even under Stinson,
The jury said that they didn't believe that they
the
was
Gleason
victims.
calculation was incorrect, and we're also preserving for further
He
review
is
a
learning,
challenge
baby.
to whether
Now,
Stinson is
yes.
Right, but so for acquitted conduct
right about
purposes
that.
and looking at harmless error and how this might have played
People
out,
like,
if
oh, you
there
got
was a
money or
mistake
not,
under the
not these
guidelines, we're only
days.
looking at, we're talking about,
it's almost double.
right, well, that's, well,
So-
it takes us from, if we did 8, it would take us from, that would go from, we went from 50,
It's almost like they're making examples out of people to show them that I don't care how much money you got. If you get caught up, you might get caught up, and your money might not be able to help you because they ain't letting him out without a fight. That judge is spicy, coming back at him round like a pit bull. I don't know.
take us to 20, but it's only, we're talking about 8 points, right? We're going
It
from
would
level
go
14 to
The
20.
range would be 30 to 37 under that scenario, as
30
opposed to
to
70 to
Right.
87,
Right,
which is
right.
the starting
Okay.
point.
Can I ask you about the definition that the commission has given us of acquitted conduct? One of the
What's
things we
up?
pointed to contest the government's view is that there was a government proposal that acquitted conduct be
What's up, Rev?
defined using the word relating to or something like that.
Like to.
Related to. And the government has also pointed to a proposal that was before the Sentencing Commission that would use the word elements. And neither one of those was adopted. And instead they took this other definition that, as far as I can tell, they decided they didn't need to define further.
Everybody that's just coming in, we're listening to the Diddy appeal that happened on the 9th, okay, which was yesterday. We're listening to the whole audio of the Diddy appeal. Just getting off of work? All right.
And said something along the lines of, don't worry, it won't come up that often, and it's going to be really easy. District judges are going to be able to
That's what
figure
he
this
said.
out. Why should we worry about line drawing? And as I recall, there was a letter from the Judicial Conference Committee on Criminal Law warning them that this was a very ambiguous guideline and that they very much should provide more clarity. And they didn't. They didn't take an elements test, which I think would have been very clear. And they didn't take the government's relating to. And they gave us one that says, don't worry, district judges are going to figure this out. And I don't know, maybe the district could figure it out. I'm having trouble as an appellate judge figuring it out. What are we to make of it if we decide that it is ambiguous? Does the rule of lenity kick in to guidelines issues? Are there other interpretive principles?
What time is it here? 6:49 p.m.
So, one would be
The
the
time
rule
is
of lenity,
6:49
and
p.m.
the other would be the related, but maybe more important, constitutional avoidance principle. And even to the extent, I understand the court's the panel's position regarding, or your honor's position regarding the binding nature of those precedents we talked about earlier. But putting
What's
that
up,
aside, I think it's clear that at a minimum, there are serious constitutional concerns with using acquitted conduct. And so I think, if the court
There's that word
finds
again.
that the guideline is ambiguous, it should be interpreted, the exception should be interpreted narrowly in favor of the defendant.
And this is sort of my last question. I don't know about my colleagues. Are you aware of any other appellate courts that either have
So many
decided
people would be locked
this
away
issue
for having
or
escort,
are
right?
facing it
They'll
right
be
now?
packed,
Is
see, man.
it bubbling through the circuits
won't
in
have
other
a place
ways
to
where
put
we
it.
are soon perhaps
I'm doing good, Bridget.
benefit from the views of our sister circuits?
I am not aware of any other appellate decisions interpreting the guideline. There are some decisions, relating to the Watts issue, but
Sure, but you're not
not-
aware of anything currently bubbling?
my colleague advises me that there's a case pending in the First
Good,
Circuit
good. That's good.
on this.
Do you happen? Well, that's fine. Well, if it comes out If it comes out, we'll find it, but that's helpful.
Okay.
Unless there are any further questions, we have kept you up considerably past the 10 minutes. So, but don't go away because we're going to see you again in a rebuttal. So
I'll have more to say.
I hope you have a bottle of water there.
Oh.
We will now hear from the government.
Now they're gonna hear from the government. So that was Diddy's lawyer. So now we're getting right here from the government, y'all. Everybody keep tapifying, keep sharifying. Thank you so much for the 58K. We on the Y to the tube. See everybody over there, give a thumbs up.
It might be afternoon at this point, but may it please the court. My name is Christy Slavic, and I represent the United States on this appeal as I did in the district court proceedings below. Judge Subramanian correctly applied the new acquitted conduct guideline in this case. And moreover, in determining the appropriate sentence under section 3553A, Judge Subramanian properly considered the aggravated manner in which the defendant carried out his Mann Act offenses, which is of course consistent.
You say aggravated manner. Let's talk about that. Why shouldn't we hold you to the way you prosecuted the case? You went to the jury and you said, this man did all these terrible things for purposes of the RICO conspiracy, for purposes of sex trafficking, and they acquitted him. And then on the Mann Act, it was just a sideshow, and you put him. I don't think there was any evidence or any live witness testimony. Just look at this. You said, look at these charts, and now you want us to rely on all this acquitted conduct that was presented to the jury that was presumably rejected for purposes of or to allow a district court for purposes of the guidelines.
Judge.
So why should we hold you to what you argued to the jury?
Your Honor, I have several responses, but
Please.
First is that much of the conduct that the district court focused on in imposing the sentence was not acquitted conduct at all. In fact, it was admitted conduct. The extreme physical violence that took place in the context of these freak-offs.
I get all that. I understand that. But that's not my question to you. My question to you is, why shouldn't we hold you? It's not what the government's, what the district court relied upon. I'm asking why we shouldn't hold you in terms
this is his appeal.
Requiring the district court to hold the government.
This is the appeal.
To what it presented to the jury for purposes of, for deciding the scope of acquitted conduct, to look at what you actually presented to the jury for purposes of those charges, and then asking, did it overlap with the acquitted charges? And I don't think there's any overlap here.
Sure. So just backing up a moment to talk about how the case was presented. Counts 2 and 4 were the sex trafficking counts, and those, of course, were acquitted counts. Counts 3 and 5 were the Mann Act counts. All counts were charged as courses of conduct as opposed to specific instances. And for counts 2 and 4 that related to Cassie, that course of conduct related to the freak-offs that took place between 2009 and 2018, I believe. With respect to counts 4 and 5 that related to the hotel nights with Jane, that course of conduct was from 2021 through 2024. So the evidence of the hotel nights and the freak-offs related both to the sex trafficking and to the Mann Act charges. Okay. And that's how it was presented to the jury. It was never presented as this evidence relates to sex trafficking and this evidence relates to the Mann Act. There was never a dividing line.
But when you get to summation, there is, right? So you say, let's start with count 3. The defendant is charged in count 3 with interstate transportation for the purpose of prostitution related to freak-offs involving Cassie. Mm-hmm. That's how you describe count 3. I think that's right. And then you go on to talk about all of the evidence about escorts traveling. And it doesn't talk in your discussion of count 3. And similarly, it's a very, very mirrored for count 5 when you talk about Jane Doe. Doesn't talk about Ms. Ventura or Ms. Doe being coerced, or Ms. Ventura or Ms. Doe being transported. It says count 3 is about escorts traveling for the purposes of contact with Cassie, and count 5 is about escorts traveling for the purpose of contact with Jane. As Judge Baker is saying, where else can we divine the government's theory of those 2 counts other than summation, and why shouldn't we hold to it?
So just to be clear, the government's theory was that the travel involved both Cassie and Jane and escorts. But I think that
what you said in your clip.
So everybody who's coming in, we're listening to the appeal case of Diddy that happened yesterday. So we listen to the whole audio. I'm doing good, TikTok mama. How you doing? Thank you for the heart meme. All right, so everybody come on in. Come on in and put your earbuds in and whatever you got to do. Because the tea is percolating hot for them to sit up and deny the facts that he acquitted of those charges. Yeah, I know. They just like totally, CMAC, they totally keep ignoring it every time they bring it up. They keep overglazing it. Okay, ready for the tea. All right, let's listen.
I don't have the exact words of the closing, but that was. I think that your other question is why shouldn't the government be held to what
let
it
me just stop you for a second, because the last thing you say on count 3 is, quote, all of the examples that I just went over showed the defendant caused commercial sex workers to travel across state lines for freak-offs. The defendant is guilty of count 3 based on any single one of these instances. Then you say, let's move to count 5. So that's how you started and ended count 3.
So the point was the government in closing went over several examples. It was not a comprehensive list of all the instances of travel because
no, but the theory was that he caused commercial sex workers to travel. That was the theory on which you asked the jury to convict Mr. Combs on count 3.
Money, Bridget.
Sure.
Not that he caused Ms. Ventura to travel or that he coerced Ms. Ventura into something. The theory was he caused commercial sex workers to travel. Other than the constitutional challenges, sort of, there's no sufficiency of the evidence challenge to that for good reason. It looks pretty much like he did. But that's the government's theory, right?
That was the government's argument at closing. I think kind of backing up the import of this line of questioning is, shouldn't we hold the government to what it argued in closing? And I don't think that that's right. I think the theory is, if the government made this argument, doesn't that mean that the jury accepted that argument and didn't consider any other possibilities? And I don't think that that's a fair inference.
What we're trying to do here is to figure out where draw this line.
Right there.
The jury acquitted on certain things and then convicted on other things. So what does a jury have to rely upon? Don't you think they're listening very intently to the closing argument? Isn't that going to be very, very important in their consideration?
Of course, Your Honor, of course. But the jury in this case, was properly instructed on each element of the Mann Act and had to find each element of the Mann Act met beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think it's, as a logical matter, I think it's an impossible task to discern the minimum quantum of evidence that would be sufficient to sustain the government's burden. And I think that sort of inquiry also goes against this court's precedent, specifically the Martinez case that says a court only knows what the jury's verdicts were, not what the jury found.
Well, right. No, and that, I don't think anybody's questioning that. But the problem for the government is that there's a new guideline that said, figure it out. That basically says there is such a thing as acquitted conduct. And as Judge Subramanian pointed out, I think quite accurately in sort of speaking with the greatest amount of precision possible, there is no such thing as acquitted conduct. Juries don't acquit people of conduct, they acquit them of charges. They find that certain elements were not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. They don't find that someone's innocent. But now the guidelines have been amended, so there is a thing called acquitted conduct. We've got to figure it out. So the question is, how do we measure that? So we're not looking at general principles like Martinez saying, did the jury find something? The only place that you're going to find, I think, in our case law where we say an acquittal necessarily implies something is in our collateral estoppel branch of double jeopardy jurisprudence. And I think, I guess one question I would have for you is, why would that not defeat the government's argument, at least with respect to coercion in this case? If, for example, the jury had hung
I went to Atlantic City to a little get together in Atlantic City.
The jury hung on, well, no, let's, no. I have political spinning out of control. I guess what I'm wondering is if there were some hypothetical additional count that the jury had hung on here that required a finding of coercion with respect to one of the two victims, why you would not be collaterally estopped under the double jeopardy clause from retrying the defendant on that count. Let's say there was a conspiracy to commit sex trafficking.
He got a
Well,
lot
let me
of
just
Count two.
push
Why
back
would that
on-
not be
Let me just push
precluded?
back on this
It
hypothetical
looks
that
fine, yeah.
a foundational issue that I have is that the defendant was not acquitted of coercion.
Aileen is back.
He was acquitted of sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion. The jury was
Okay.
never asked, was there coercion?
Right, but we have-
Sorry.
Well, under that theory, there is no such thing as acquitted conduct. So you're kind of fighting the very principle of the guideline. You're saying that because there were three alternate elements, I think, fraud, force, or coercion,
This judge is
that
not on
the
their
three
side.
alternate elements, there is no
This
acquitted
judge-
conduct. You have to accept the premise because the guidelines have been amended. There is such a thing as acquitted conduct. So why don't you actually, let me frame it this way. Under your view, with respect to count two, what is the acquitted conduct?
So the commission thought
Never
very
mind,
long and
should
hard about
say
this
that.
issue, clearly, and they declined to
Conspiracy,
set
Jamal?
any bright line rules.
No,
Yeah, but now
defined.
here we are.
Exactly.
So what's
Thank
the
you,
government's
TikTok
view
mama, for the
of
link.
what
Thank
the
you,
acquitted conduct is underlying count two?
So I think Judge Subramanian's test, which is
No. That's. I think Judge Subramanian's test is what's overlapping conduct.
What's up, Mac Life?
as a first step to Judge Subramanian's test, he described acquitted conduct as conduct that underlies the
Yeah. So you tell me what conduct underlies count two.
what specific conduct. Well, I think a good example of conduct that could be considered acquitted conduct that the judge did not consider in applying the exception was the intercontinental evidence at trial that showed the defendant assaulting Cassandra Ventura during the course of.
So that's acquitted conduct in your view.
I think that that's a fair characterization.
So that's a useful. The other conduct that illustrates use of coercion is not acquitted conduct.
The reason that that's acquitted conduct, in my view, is because that does not tend to prove the elements of the Mann Act.
No.
That's the second question.
No. There's two things here. You can have acquitted conduct and you can have offense conduct in the guideline. They can overlap. And that's why the guidelines say where they overlap, you can consider them. So the government sort of doesn't lose by saying something's acquitted conduct here, because then the district judge, if it's overlapping, can still consider it.
Right.
So let me ask it this way. There is evidence on the flight back, these videos of the events that have happened in the past, and the government's argument to the jury is that's coercive, right? That this was an implicit threat, right? His discussion of releasing these videos was implicitly, if you do not continue to engage in this conduct, I will release this publicly and that will destroy your reputation, right?
That's right.
So it seems to me that that's clearly acquitted conduct. I thought the government's argument is that it is also offense conduct. And therefore, because it's overlapping, the judge was allowed to consider it. So I want to ask you about just the first part of my question.
Okay.
In your view, did what Mr. Combs did on the plane back from Cannes also constitute acquitted conduct?
So I think the answer is maybe. I think it depends on the definition of acquitted.
No. Under the government's view.
Yes or no? Yes
Let's
or
pretend
no?
it's before sentencing.
Yes or no?
Under the government's view, is that unless you're saying he wasn't acquitted of anything, because if there was fraud, if there was force, there was fraud or coercion, he's guilty, right?
What I'm saying is no. I don't think that's right. It's not just if there was force, fraud, or coercion, he's guilty. He had to know or recklessly
There are
disregard.
multiple elements, but I think what your argument would lead to is that there's no such thing as acquitted conduct, because there's always multiple elements. One can't, from a jury's acquittal, ever know which of the elements they found unsatisfied. Ipso facto, there's never a category, there's never a bucket that's filled with something called acquitted conduct. Tell me why I'm wrong about that. In what world is there a bucket that's full of acquitted conduct in your position?
Your Honor, I think this case is
It's on the YT.
there's a lot of gray lines.
All right.
And I think that the cases that come up in some of the dissents that the panel has already mentioned related to drug cases, for instance, where there's a conviction on a conspiracy count and an acquittal on a distribution count, or vice versa. And there's a special interrogatory where the jury finds specifically some amount of drugs. Like, I think that is very easily described as acquitted conduct.
Absent, especially, when does your test yield anything that constitutes acquitted conduct?
I think that straightforward cases where facts were presented, I think
when is that ever happening?
in one count, there's an acquittal. I think the acquitted weight of the drug would be...
each of those counts, let's assume it's a distribution count. Each of those counts has multiple elements, right? Knowing what the drug was, distributing it purposely, right? I purposely handed it to you. That's I knowingly distributed it. But also knowing that it was heroin, right? Because the defense might have been, oh, I thought it was fake drugs. I thought I was cheating, right? Each is saying, well, I don't know whether the jury found that he didn't know it was heroin, or I didn't know that he thought that he was purposely distributing it, or whatever it might be. So
I think going back to the guideline itself, which does create a definition,
but it have some content.
Exactly.
And it can't be what we said under the Sixth Amendment is true, that there is no finding implicit in
he's reaching
a verdict of acquittal. So that's off the table as to what the commission was trying to say.
That's right, Your Honor. And what the commission did say is that the court is in the best position to determine what is acquitted conduct and what is convicted conduct.
According to some rule of decision, not in terms of arbitrarily deciding A in one case and B in another. So we are tasked, as the district court was, with coming up with an articulable rule.
Sure.
So here we are.
And can I ask you please to articulate what's the principle? And we have to write in an opinion. It's the same question I posed to your friend, and that distinguishes acquitted.
So acquitted conduct, one thing that I think is supported by the commentary is that
73K,
conduct that underlies an acquitted charge can be considered acquitted conduct. That's like the first step. The second step, of course, is whether that conduct can nevertheless be considered as relevant conduct. But that's that first step. What is acquitted conduct? What Judge Subramanian did is said acquitted conduct is conduct that underlies an acquitted count, right? Okay. And under that definition, in this case, there was a lot of overlapping conduct. And so he had to determine
So how do we know whether there's overlapping conduct? What do we look to determine that?
I think that's where the judge's discretion, the judge who's overseeing the trial.
But this is, we're trying to find out what the purpose of the guideline is, to make sure that the jury's acquittal isn't negated. So we're trying to understand what this is difficult, right? We're trying to understand what the jury did. And we have a conviction and we have an acquittal, right? So we're trying to understand what the jury did.
So I think that the appropriate test is the test that Judge Subramanian articulated, which is to assess whether the conduct can still be considered as relevant conduct for the purposes of the guidelines. He looked to whether that conduct tended to establish an element of the convicted count. And in this case, those two narrow instances.
Well, let me ask you that. Why does the coercion tend to prove, say, with the conflict, why does the coercive nature
It doesn't
coercion
sound appealing.
tend to establish the fact? You can still look at the underlying raw facts. Mr. Combs coming back in the plane, sitting next to Ms. Ventura, showing the videos and all that. That could evidence could still be considered, say, fairly to ascertain what Mr. Combs's intent would be for the events that would follow. And yet it could not, say, under the defense's view, be considered for purposes of establishing coercion, because coercion was an element of one of the acquitted offenses.
It doesn't sound appealing.
I think to answer your first question, which is how does the travel in con and the situation on the airplane, how does that establish the Mann Act? I think it's for the reasons that Judge, you articulated in your colloquy.
Right. I'm saying, let's grant you that. Let's hypothesize that the events on the airplane are admissible and were properly considered by the judge to figure out, did Mr. Combs really intend what was all going to happen was going to happen? Let's just posit that. But isn't there a world of the
I feel they'll only be solved in what's in Diddy's head, and they don't know what's in Diddy's head. So right now they just speculated. Did Diddy know he was going to do what he's going to do? You don't know that. You got to be in Diddy's head for that. This is where they're stuck at.
But you can't draw the further conclusion that that was coercive in nature.
Well, the guidelines.
Because that's what the jury said did not happen, or did not find happened, and therefore it's acquitted conduct.
So I think because this acquitted conduct tends to prove an element
Was coercive, because I think that's really a distinct fact, right?
That inference is coercion is defined in the guideline. The fraud and coercion guideline, or excuse me, enhancement is set out in the guideline. And the definition under that, coercion under that enhancement.
It is coercive conduct. I think what Judge Nardini's asking, and I have the same question, is how does the fact of its coerciveness tend to establish some, in whole or in part, an element of the Mann Act offense?
I think it relates to the temporal proximity between the coercion, the threats, I'll call it, the threats, the transport, and the demand for a freak off.
So let's say the conversation instead was, instead of it being coercive on the plane, was, when we get back, my plan is to fly some escorts in and you're going to have sex with them and I'm going to pay them for that.
But he never said that,
Sure.
though.
I think that would establish the
He never
intent.
said that out loud.
So why is the additional aspect of that conversation, that encounter on the plane that's described, that the coercive aspect of that, why is that add anything to establish in whole or in part the Mann Act offense?
Because I think it's what he's asking for. It's the threats are not followed by a request to go to dinner, a request to, ask Cassie to do the dishes. Those threats are followed by a demand for a freak off. So the coercive nature of the threats are directly relevant to the intent to have the freak off, which then later happens.
Well, okay. Except you've agreed that it didn't need to be coercive in order to support that aspect.
No, not necessarily. It just so happened in these two specific instances, the threats did amount to coercion under the enhancement. And I think that was,
Everybody up on the Y side.
I think Judge Subramanian.
Make sure you subscribe.
I don't know. It doesn't map onto this case, but I'm trying to make sense of the acquitted conduct
Judge.
guideline. We have a defendant who's charged with murder.
Uh-oh.
He points a gun at the victim's head.
But Diddy's not
Pulls the
charged
trigger
with the
at
F
point
word.
blank range, kills the victim. He's
Sir, you're
charged
giving
with
the
first
wrong
and second degree
comparison.
murder.
That's the
The
wrong
jury
comparison. I'm
acquits
sorry.
of first degree, which would have required a finding of
It don't make no
premeditation,
sense.
but it convicts of second degree murder. Let's say it was, I don't know, some sort of heat of passion or something you just did on the moment.
Yeah.
Comes to sentencing. Is the premeditation, which is purely mens rea, in your view, acquitted conduct or not? And if so, is the judge, in my hypothetical, allowed to make a finding of premeditation by a preponderance and sentence the defendant accordingly under the guidelines?
So the premeditation, I think.
Because what I'm trying to do is draw a distinction between the actions, the physical actions. And I'm going to analogize that to Mr. Combs coming back in the plane, sitting next to Ms. Ventura, showing the video, saying the words he said. Those are sort of raw facts.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, they underlie in my hypothetical, clearly the underlying facts of the man reaching over with a gun, pulling the trigger, and killing a victim are
What's
raw
up,
facts.
Stanley?
Clearly,
Everybody, come on in
my hypothetical, they underlie the second-degree murder conviction.
But Diddy doesn't have a
But the
F
jury
charge.
was acquitted on first.
See, that's where he's
degree
wrong
murder,
at. You
meaning they
comparing
have
apples to
not
oranges. sir.
found premeditation beyond a reasonable doubt. It seems to me that
It's
if
a
we
different
pursue the government's theory here,
premeditation,
which is you can
You
consider
talking
the
about the
facts.
M word. You talking about the M word, sir. Right? Am I right or wrong? That judge, Diddy, you better get a new judge.
I think
You
taxes
better
are
get a new
something
judge,
that
Diddy.
makes all of us panic, whether or not
This
you want to
judge right
admit it.
here,
Being able to
he's
pass my
comparing you
taxes
to an
to a
N-word
certified
suspect.
expert means that
And
I
that's
have
not the
to
correct
only collect
comparison.
documents,
It's
I
not.
give it away, and then they
In
will
no
let me know when it's ready to
capacity.
go. That
In
is
no
1
form and no
minute of me
fashion.
thinking about it, and that
There was
allows
no
me to do everything
M-word
else in
in
my life.
Diddy's
Now
trial.
taxes is filing without breaking a sweat.
Am I right or wrong?
If you have ever
Red
wanted to
room.
land a 100 to 150K
Red
a
room.
year fully remote career, in
There's
the
no
next
red room
4
in there.
months, listen up carefully. And before you run away
This
thinking
judge
this
is
is too good to
comparing
be
him
true, it all
to
comes down
somebody
to
who did the M word. Let's listen.
Surrounding the walking back in the plane, the showing the videos and all that. And then the judge can draw whatever inferences the judge thinks appropriate because the facts were properly before the jury on account of conviction. Then the judge, in my hypothetical, would be able to find premeditation beyond by preponderance and sentence accordingly under the
Some
guidelines.
comments
And
was
is
filtered.
that
Who typed
your
the
view?
I
comment?
think
Type
that's
it
right.
again.
I think that's right, Judge.
Your comment was
Um,
filtered. I want to see what
Assuming
you
I'm
got to
talking
say.
hypothetical.
And you don't think that that is what the commission was trying to
Listen to
avoid?
this judge.
No, I think the commission understood that there's overlapping conduct.
The judge sounded like the prosecution.
In trials of this nature, where these different counts rely on the same factual instances to prove the different counts.
He wasn't handling
It's just from
right?
gut instinct. It seems
Right?
like my hypothetical would be the prototypical example of what the guidelines as amended were trying to avoid. So it seems hard then if that is the government's view of how it would map out in my murder hypothetical. It's hard to accept how plausible the government's reading of the guideline is. more
Your Honor,
generally.
I think hypotheticals are I find very difficult in this context.
Thank you for
The commission
75K,
understood
y'all.
that these situations
Welcome
are
in. I'm your host,
incredibly
MissKnockout.
fact intensive,
We're listening
and
to
that's
the Diddy
in
appeal.
large part because they only come up after a trial. And trials are all different, right? And evidence comes in different ways
Trials are all
and
different.
weaves together differently. This is a very fact-intensive inquiry. I think what Judge Subramanian did
Thank you for
here
the 75K,
is
y'all.
he looked at the entire record, all 8 weeks, and imagine that being like a pizza, right? He's
Like a
thinking about
pizza.
the entire trial as a pizza, all the facts, all the evidence
Pizza.
adduced during that 8 weeks. But in considering the guidelines, he's not considering that whole pizza pie. He's considering a slice.
A slice.
And what's in that slice is what tends to prove the Mann Act. And that's why he's when he looks at the two specific incidents of coercion, those incidents are specifically tied to transportation.
Chrissy,
They're
good
tied
evening.
to the Mann
And I
Act.
guess that's where I'm suggesting that I don't know how to follow that.
Everybody come on in, continue, tap in. Thank you for the 76K. Everybody on the Y to the TZ, get this video a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to MissKnockout. All right. We are listening to the appeal audio for the Diddy trial of his appeal. This is the They didn't make a decision. This is them just presenting their argument. All right. This is going to go on for a little minute, or maybe they might make a decision quick. Who knows? But this is just like the opening arguments. And let's listen. You know, they're arguing over the Mann Act. Is it the Mann Act? Did he get over his time? Did he get too much time? And we're just listening. What's up, Anthony?
Metaphor, so I won't try. That it's a little bit more analogous in my murder hypothetical that the judge in my hypothetical can consider.
I don't agree with that hypothetical that the judge did. He's comparing Diddy to a Emmer, you know, unaliver. And I don't feel like that's a good comparison. Why did you do that, sir? That didn't make any, that's confusing. There's no M word in his trial, so you couldn't find another case to compare him to?
Actions of people pointing the gun, shooting, the bullet hitting, the victim dying, but would not be able to consider the additional inference of premeditation. So you can still be considering the slice if the slice is considered the evidence.
They talk about the pizza again. They make me hungry.
I'm suggesting,
I want a slice of
positing the
pizza.
possibility that the guideline might limit the inferences that can be drawn to the extent those inferences are part of acquitted conduct, and not also inferences that would themselves.
It show how slow and simple they are. It surely does.
I think that's right. Again, it's I find it very difficult to think about these hypotheticals in the abstract. But I think here that slice of conduct that the judge considered is two very narrow instances of transportation. I think undoubtedly tend to prove the Mann Act and also meet the requirements of the enhancement under the guidelines.
Can I ask you, I don't know if I can change the subject a little bit. We talked about any number of issues today. Can I ask you specifically about the leadership enhancement? One of the very specific questions we were talking about with your colleague on the other side was whether, as the government submits, there are at an irreducible minimum 5 criminally responsible participants in the Mann Act. And the government, as I understood your brief, said, well, there's Mr. Combs, number 1. There are the 2 victims.
That's right. Cassie and Jane. Yes.
Cassie and Jane. So we're up to 3. And the government posited that the 2 escorts who were transported across state lines.
No, that's slightly inaccurate. Yeah, it's
clarify.
Of course.
Basically, the fact that he has
liable participants.
They should let him
besides
early release.
Mr. Combs.
Well, he did
as you
19
said,
months.
Jane and Cassie, the 2 victims.
He's going on his 3rd year
and
next
then
year.
2 of the owners of an escort service.
Oh, the owners of the
they weren't escorts themselves, but they were owners of the service who facilitated the transport of escorts who worked for that service.
Oh, and then, so your argument is that because they were involved in the transportation, and obviously in your view, the evidence showed that this whole thing was clearly designed for prostitution.
That's right.
You're up to 5.
I don't think you got to do the whole 50 months
on that point.
I don't think
Does that make the whole question of acquitted conduct with respect to the leadership enhancement go away?
Yes, Your Honor. And I believe it could go away in another independent way, which is that the conduct was otherwise extensive, which is another prong of the leadership enhancement. And I don't think that the defendant even challenges that in his reply. So the leadership enhancement is met in both of those ways. With respect to
were those, remind me, and I should know this, and I don't recall, did the government present arguments that the escorts and their employers were members of the alleged racketeering enterprise?
No, Your Honor. The only individual that the government identified as a criminally criminally responsible participant for the purposes of the leadership enhancement was Christina Coram, who was an employee of Mr. Combs and who was alleged.
My question was about in terms of when you argued the RICO conspiracy count.
Yes.
To the jury, did you argue that the escorts or their employers were members of the RICO conspiracy?
No.
Yeah, but
So
everybody
your
else would have
argument
been
would be
released.
that to the extent.
All right, y'all. Hold on, y'all. Let's get back to the get back. Okay, it should go in the same spot that we left off in. Everybody come on in. Everybody continue to tab. Thank you for the 81K. Thank you so much for the 81K.
To the extent the district judge could permissibly consider the escorts and their employers, there would have been no overlap at all with acquitted conduct. That would be your argument.
Exactly.
Don't forget
And
Jay-Z
can you
is being
remind us
investigated by
who the judge
DOJ.
said?
Yeah, they always trying to get Jay-Z.
Who the judge said?
They're going to
were
try
participants?
again and
They
again.
were criminally liable
What else is
For the
participants.
purposes of the increase, right?
Yes.
It's
James and Collins.
Ventura.
They don't like it
Ventura,
that Jay-Z
Jones,
got all that
Coram,
money and he reached the heights
Coram,
that he did. So they
who
got to take
was
him
the
down.
only employee.
And then
That's the
James
big
and
picture.
Bridget Collins.
Bridget Creshover Collins. Yes.
Those are the two
Those are the two
employers. So if
escort
we
employees.
knock
What's up,
out,
Rob?
if we were to say to drop out quorum,
That's right. You still
hypothetically,
have
in your
five.
view, you're still left with 5.
That's right.
And that's okay.
And that meets the enhancement.
And then he also said the services of numerous outsiders that were peculiar and necessary to defense,
That's right. And that is to
but
say,
some of whom he included as among that number his assistants.
that's right. But the assistants were not alleged to have been part of the racketeering enterprise. So that is, like I said, that's another way to support the application of the leadership enhancement in that case without even touching acquitted conduct or potential acquitted conduct.
Come on in, y'all. We listened to the whole appeal.
You know, with respect
We're going on,
to
on 3 hours on this.
the 3553A
They act
factors,
like
we
the
touched on
enhancement
this
is a briefly
briefly
Timon?
with my colleague, but as Judge, you pointed out, the case law is binding that under the 3553A factors, sentencing courts can consider acquitted conduct. But I just point out that what the judge did here, what really drove his Section 3553A analysis, didn't rely on acquitted conduct. It didn't even rely on disputed issues to begin with. And let me just give you an example. In assessing the history and characteristics of the defendant, the court found that the defendant abused the power and control he had over the lives of women he professed to love dearly. He abused them physically, emotionally, and psychologically.
Here we go.
That's not acquitted conduct. That was all admitted conduct. The
Admitted
defendant
conduct.
admitted from the outset of the trial that the defendant
admitted
engaged in horrific domestic violence. And
Did he even admit it? Because I didn't
all of
say
that
nothing.
conduct was admitted. In assessing the seriousness of the offense, the court noted that the defendant plied Ms. Ventura and Jane with drugs. That was also admitted. The defendant admitted to personal use quantities of drugs that he shared with his girlfriends during freak-offs. That was admitted. In thinking about the seriousness of the offense, the court found that the conduct occurred for over a decade and with tremendous frequency over that time period. That has nothing to do with acquitted conduct.
On the drugs, let me just ask, if you had said he had drugs of his own and he shared them with Ms. Ventura and Ms. Doe, I understand your argument that's not acquitted conduct. You've just said he plied them with it, which sounds to me very much like coercion, which is what we've been talking about.
The testimony was that
I don't know if I'm not mistaken, but I was in court for 30 days, and it seemed like to me that they all took the pharmaceuticals. Like they wasn't like slipped in their drink or whatever. They all said that they all was doing pharmaceuticals. So where is the coercion in that? Right? Because I was
Those
in
were
court for
shared
that.
at these freak-offs and hotel nights.
Ain't none of
with
them
the
said,
friends
oh, they
so that they
snuck
could get
it. No.
through the freak-off.
Or
The
even
word that you apply,
Clayton
which
Howard.
he is
Clayton Howard
using the
said that he
drugs
took
to
it. He was
get their
curious.
compliance and participation, which again
I'm
goes back to
confused, like,
coercion.
right, Betty?
But the fact there are
Well,
these facts that he
participants,
shared drugs
exactly.
is the point. But to Judge Subramanian,
Sure.
So you're saying that Diddy shared it and he wasn't pushing it on them, making them take it. He was sharing it, which is true because all of them said that they willingly took it. They was all doing it anyway. Like he didn't invent the pharmaceuticals, right? Yeah, she was a
Shared drugs. Those were Judge Subramanian's.
so
words.
that sounds like he's talking about coercion.
Well, I think the
thank you,
point of that is that he shared them, not just shared them with drugs, like shared them with girlfriends trying to be nice, but he shared them in the context of freak off and hotel nights.
Shared it in
so
the
that those
context
women
of
could get
freak-offs.
through the hotel nights and freak off.
You take pharmaceuticals. You take
Misconducts that falls short of coercion. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's exactly right. That was admitted, and that those categories of misconduct involve physical abuse, which was fully admitted.
Did Judge Subramanian say anything to suggest that he was thinking about a category of misconduct
everybody blessify Miss Knockout
short of coercion?
so she won't be
need
brokified. There's 48 people in the room.
Those statements in light of what he had previously stated, which was that there was coercion and that even if he could not consider the coercion under the guidelines, he would nevertheless do it under the 3553A factors. So why should we, in other words, why should we, considering he already said there was coercion, why would we not read those comments as his illustrations of the coercion rather than a suggestion on his part that they were misconduct that fell short of coercion?
I think you read the words of the conduct that he's describing, and what I've just read is admitted conduct. So call it coercion, call it physical abuse. It's admitted.
Well, but again, the words the judge uses are you applied them to drugs, forcing Ms. Ventura into addiction. That may well be true, but our question is not whether that's supported.
But that's well true, but they said that they took it willingly. See, that's the part I don't understand. They keep saying that, but Cassie said herself that she was doing them anyway. She was doing them besides him. So what is this like forcing them? Like, I don't know if they're saying the right thing here.
The fact our question is, doesn't that show the district court considering the conduct that is coercive? Because plying and forcing don't sound like something different than coercion.
I think that in this case where the drug use and the drug sharing was admitted, I think that can't be acquitted conduct. I think that that's admitted conduct. And I think that the judge is free to consider it. And especially in the 3553 context, where there aren't restrictions on considering acquitted conduct under the binding precedent of this court. So I think that the judge was, I wouldn't necessarily agree that he's describing coercion. And I think free to rely on that in imposing a sentence under the 3553A factors.
At which point then we get into the constitutional question is in fact
Too ambiguous.
That was not.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Kim 95. Kim? Thank you for the hand heart. Hey, Trisha. What's up, Trish?
We've been talking a lot about the guidelines and Judge Subramanian's application of the acquitted conduct guidelines.
We're listening to Diddy's appeal case, y'all.
The last thing that I would say on this is that even if Judge Subramanian made an error in his application and interpretation of the acquitted conduct guideline, which we don't think he did, but even if he did, that error would be harmless. And that is because he unequivocally and explicitly stated that he would impose the same sentence regardless of the acquitted conduct guideline. He reviewed voluminous sentence
Small business
All right, commercial, y'all. Everybody keep tapping in. We're listening to Diddy's appeal trial. We'll listen to the whole thing. We're coming on the tail end of it. Everybody coming on in. They giving him a hard time. I don't know about this one because that doggone judge is a hard customer. They keep going through the same thing over and over again. And they keep saying that they falsified and everything's all alleged. The pharmaceuticals on them. When Cassie said out her own mouth that she been taking the pharmaceuticals. They weren't even focused, like that part wasn't the thing.
Today I'm switching from walking to Tai
They were
Chi.
saying that he was having free calls with him.
This is me after 28
Yeah, but
days
there
of
was
Tai
no
Chi.
young kids in the
yesterday,
case
my
though.
neighbor-
There was no young kids
Sentencing
proven in the case.
He
None.
noted at the outset of
So
the
that is
proceeding
not a founded
that there
thing.
was a general lack of guidance with respect to this guideline. He considered the arguments of all the parties, and he provided detailed reasons
Came in
for
late, but I heard
his
P. Diddy
application
might
of
get
the
out
various
next week.
enhancements.
Well, that's all
Could you
speculation.
remind me? I think I asked
They
you a
gotta make
question
a
to your
decision.
colleague on the other side. Just remind
So
me.
there haven't been a decision made yet. This is the arguments in court. They're trying to fight for this appeal. They haven't made the decision yet. The decision can be a week and the decision can be months, right? So we just got to wait and see. There's rumors going around that he's going to get out. He's getting out. I mean, we just got to wait and see what they say. Exactly. So it was false information to blemish his character, right? Exactly.
I recall that as he found individual
That's the prosecutor's
sentencing
job.
guideline enhancements,
Is to blemish your
he
character.
then would say, I impose this
That's what
enhancement,
their job is.
even if the
I enjoyed
acquitted
it. Yeah, I enjoyed
guideline
the trip. It was
conduct,
cool.
even if the acquitted conduct guideline does not permit me to do so, I would impose the same sentence anyway. So he did
The
this
trip
with
was
respect
cool.
to each of the three enhancements, right? Did he say something at the end that one could read as a wraparound? And even if I have erred with respect to all three enhancements, or did he only say that those three points?
So I think when you look carefully at the record, he noted that his sentence would be the same regardless of the acquitted conduct guideline.
But not to that
With
extent.
respect
so
to
they
the fraud and
won't be
coercion
sued by
enhancement
Right.
and with respect to the leadership
Right.
enhancement. I don't
Right,
think he made the
Tina.
same sentence, the same
Mhm.
statement with respect to the victim grouping enhancement.
So let me ask you this. Wouldn't there be an argument on the other side that even if
Listen to that judge.
we were to take at face value the district judge's statement that he would have imposed the same sentence, even if any one given guidelines enhancement was erroneous, if we were to conclude that two
I
or
don't know how to
more were
share here.
erroneous,
Oh, yeah, now you
then
go
we
to the
don't
bottom of
know
the video.
what
the
the
arrow.
sentencing judge's intentions
Thank you,
would
Dave,
be, and
right?
we would normally
Thank you
send
for
it
the
back.
club
Is that,
chat.
would you agree or disagree with
No,
that statement?
I think I disagree, assuming I'm tracking this correctly. And I would point to the Jas and Dara cases from this circuit, where both courts were interpreting a new guideline enhancement. And
Thank you, Dave, right?
like in the case here, where Judge Subramanian was interpreting the new acquitted conduct guideline.
Thank you, Dave,
And
right?
in those cases, the court noted
Thank
that
you for
this
the
was a new
repost,
guideline,
Bridget.
there was some ambiguity, and
Thank you,
that
Aileen,
even
for
if
the
they
light.
got that guideline wrong, which
Hey,
the court
Donna.
ultimately decided they did, they would impose the same sentence regardless. And that's exactly the situation that we have here. With respect to the acquitted conduct guideline, which is the guideline that could affect the fraud and coercion enhancement and the leadership enhancement, Judge Subramanian specifically said that it doesn't matter if the acquitted conduct guideline
Hey,
applies
Erica,
here
what's
or
up?
not, I would impose the same sentence. He did not say that with respect to the victim grouping enhancement, which has nothing to do with the acquitted conduct.
100K,
And I
almost
think
at
that's a good
100K, y'all.
example of
Let's get to
why
100K.
Judge Subramanian's statements that he
daybreak.
would impose the same sentence regardless are not just simple incantations
We're
of
talking
magic
about
words
Diddy
to
right now.
evade appellate
So
review.
this is Diddy's appeal case. They're giving him a run for his money. We don't know what the decision is yet. They're arguing back and forth about different points on the case and on the Mann Act. And did he get overcharged and over sentenced because a lot of the other stuff was dropped and they're just going back and forth? But you know, a lot of people are saying he's going to get out next week. Nobody knows when Diddy's going to get out, but the judge and the people in the court. That's it. The people out here, they don't know. All they know about is clicks and views. That's all they know. So it's like, oh yeah, Diddy's getting out, and you clicking it, bloop, 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 bloop. Then Diddy ain't getting out. We don't know if Diddy's getting out. They got to come to a decision yet. You know what I'm saying? So this is the tail end of the
he specifically
appeal.
Noted the ambiguity of this particular guideline that would affect
everybody that's just coming in. I'm on all platforms now, so you can go to my link tree, watch this on the Y to the Tubesy, the Face to the Booksies, the XEXEXE, and everybody else, Twitch or wherever else you can watch it. You can watch the whole thing back. If you missed the appeal, we listen to the whole thing through. All right. So yeah,
those enhancements, and therefore any potential error, which of course we would submit there is none. Any potential error would be harmless here.
Actually, this question:
thank you for the 100K, y'all.
50-month sentence.
Thank you,
Substantively unreasonable in the absence of the district court's factual findings as to violence and coercion.
Just as an initial matter, the substantive unreasonable argument, I think, was waived. That was not raised by defense until the reply brief.
I thought, again, a matter of nomenclature, they make a pretty good argument in an opening brief that then substance is that this sentence was substantively unreasonable. But so I understand your point.
So the in determining whether a sentence was substantively unreasonable, this court has to review in light of the 3553A factors. And as I mentioned, the 3553A factors were very thoughtfully considered by the district judge.
I realize that, but if we took off the table the violence and coercion, would this pass muster as would this be a substantively reasonable sentence?
Your Honor, I don't think you have to, because under the 3553A factors, all acquitted conduct can be considered.
Right.
But even if you did,
I realize that, but let's assume for the purposes of my hypothetical, assuming that we take off the table the violence and the coercion, right?
That's the third time.
Would the sentence be substantively unreasonable?
Your Honor, the
50 months for the man.
The caveat that I strongly disagree that we need to take anything off the table.
For the record.
Why she won't answer the question straight up? Unreasonable if it is manifestly unjust or shocks the conscience. And we see that sort of dynamic in some of the other cases. I'm thinking of the Jones case in which Justice Scalia, dissented. I can't remember the difference between the guidelines without consideration of acquitted conduct, but it was something astronomically high. And here, the 50-month sentence was below guidelines and reflected the fact that the judge really did consider the fact of the acquittals. If the judge had just ignored the acquittals and sentenced on the trafficking or the racketeering, the sentence would have been at least 15 years. There's a 15-year mandatory minimum term with a trafficking.
Wow.
This 50-month sentence was well below and well in line with other cases in this district. Judge Subramanian was very focused on other Mann Act sentences.
The sentence was
parties
below.
Provide a list of Mann Act cases and the sentences. And so he was fully aware of the different ranges of sentences that Mann Act defendants get. And that was a consideration, of course, under the 3553A factors, but it was appropriately weighed against other 3553A factors. And
that was a no. I just want to be clear. Was that a no? It would not be substantively unreasonable.
Original question, but I think that's a no.
It's not a violation of the Mann Act.
You're very good at debating.
That's one of the points that they're trying to make.
Very good, actually. If I was a district judge, I would say the witness will be responsive to the question. Would his 50-month sentence be substantively unreasonable in the absence of the factual findings of violence and coercion?
And the answer is no.
Is that
The
clear?
only
I
thing-
thought you were going, but
What's up,
I wanted to make sure that we had an answer to the question.
Hey,
And let me just ask you on the substantive reasonableness point. I think what I think I heard you said is that it wasn't raised in the blue brief, right?
That's right.
So, and this is a procedural unreasonableness claim that the guidelines weren't followed and there's violation of the Sixth Amendment. That's what your response is?
Sorry, say that again?
And that it's a procedural reasonableness challenge that goes to the guidelines and then to the Sixth Amendment.
That's right.
Issue about fact finding. That's what I understood your response to me.
That's
Okay,
right.
just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure.
much more succinct than. The only thing that I want to add relates back to the Mann Act, and I just would correct the record that in closing, in the government's closing argument, the summary chart that the government pointed to did include the incident related to Jane that took place in, I think it was October of 2023, where the defendant made threats to Jane's friend.
Do you have a page number in the appendix just so we have it handy? If you don't,
I
that's
have
fine.
the government exhibit, which is 1406.
1406?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll find it. Okay, I think we have exhausted our supply of questions.
Counselor,
No?
you're saying that argument was raised in your closing
the
about
judge is ready to
Jane,
go.
Yes, it was in the summary chart that the government.
And so are we.
Aligns.
and that's the
So listen, y'all. Okay, if you want to play this back, you go to the Tubesy. The link is in my link tree. All right, you could go on the X. You could go on Face to the Booksies. You could play this back and listen to the whole appeal. You know, we commentate here and there. All right. Make sure you spin my song. I have to go to a meeting at 8:00. I got 10 minutes to get there. All right. Now, I'm not making any promises. I might come back on tonight. It's Friday night. You know, we'll come back and we'll have fun. We'll do some battles, play some music or whatever. Not on the Wide to the Tubesy, though. Because, you know, they don't do music over there. All right. But I might come back. I'm not making any promises. All right. I got to go to this meeting real quick and see how it goes. If not, I'll be back early in the morning. I want to get on really early tomorrow so we could really dig in because we got other stuff that we need to go over, like Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Man update. Gucci Man did a diss record. You could go in there and check it out. It's called Crash Dummies. So go check it out. We didn't get a chance to play that. And we got to talk about the Offset TJ case. It's still going. All right. And then the warification is still going strong. And, you know, it's a lot of debauchery. We just got to keep our head together. And I want you to enjoy your Friday night. If I don't come back and see you, but I might pop up and we might get lit. You know what I'm saying? We might just bring out drinkifications and get lit or whatever. But we will be back early tomorrow morning because we got a lot to discuss. It's a lot that went on. All right. If you want to watch the playback to the appeal of Diddy audio, watch it back on my YouTube Tubesy. Give it a thumbs up, share it, join the Discord, join the super fans, and I will see you very, very soon. I know I was off like yesterday, had some running around to do. You know, I'm taking care of business too, you know. I can't be on every day. When you don't see me, you know I'm doing something. But you know I'll come right back. All right? So tomorrow we'll be back early. All right? I will see you all in a little bit. I got 10 minutes to get to my meeting. All right? I will see you later. Go watch it back on Y to the Tubesy if you came in late. All right. All my people on Y to the Tubesy, give this a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow.
Is the MissKnockout show on the airwaves? So like, if I share, if I bless, if I the flow, is the MissKnockout show. Now you already know. Hot topics, music, info, and more. If you ain't tapped in, what you came here for? MKO got the vibe, that's a full takeover. From beats to biz talk, yeah, the queen stay in clover. Trending every lane, I'm the glow you can't block. When I drop gems, whole chat goes shock. We don't do brokeify, now we amplify. Stay blessed if I let the energy fly. Hit that tapify, keep it all in the flow. Cause it's the MissKnockout show. Knockout show. Hot topics, beats and the glow. You rockin' with MissKnockout. terrified, 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 let's fight, terrified, let's fuck.